Hey, and welcome back to Anti-Social Studies. Welcome to part 2 in what is going to be an ongoing series of short videos all about the AP History exam. So today I want to talk about the thesis statement. It is, I think, the simplest point to get, but it's also the one that a lot of students think is a little bit easier than it is. And so it's the one that you really want to focus on and at least spend a few minutes on to make sure that you get this kind of basic point before you move on to the rest of your essay. So the first really simple question is, what is a thesis statement? The simple answer is, it's your answer. The thesis statement really should be a preview of the arguments that you're going to make in your essay. So this includes really two things. It's you answering the question with your own historical argument. You're not just repeating back the prompt and changing out the question mark for a period. You're making some sort of historical argument, and you're giving us a preview of what main topics you're going to address and you're going to use to prove that your answer is correct. So what does a thesis statement look like? There's no set length, but in general, I think a good thesis statement is anywhere from 1 to 3 complete sentences. What that means is that in theory, your entire introduction could just be one sentence, right? If you're not going to mess with context, you don't want to do anything else in the intro really, your entire intro paragraph could be your one sentence thesis, and that's totally okay. Keep in mind that the AP History essays are not about beautiful writing. They're not about creativity. It's about conveying information. And in the DBQ, it's really about making an argument and then proving that argument with the documents. Nothing else really matters, right? In theory, your thesis can also be found in your conclusion, but I think that should be a last resort. So a lot of people have been asking me, should they write a conclusion? Honestly, with only 45 minutes, I say no, but if you are going to write a conclusion, I would just restate your thesis in a new and different way. That way, if it didn't quite make sense to the reader in the intro, it typically might make a little bit more sense at the end once you've actually written your essay and you're like, oh, right, that's what I'm actually arguing. So do you need a conclusion? No, but your thesis can be in either the intro or the conclusion. So a few tips that probably seem a little basic but are really important. Include key words from the prompt. So if the prompt is about imperialism and religion, make sure you include the words imperialism and religion somewhere in there. And this is the part that gets people. This is the part that gets kids, where they think they've written a thesis statement, but not quite. Make sure that you're specific enough that a reader knows what you're going to write about. So make sure that when you're kind of giving a preview of what your topics are going to be, what your body paragraphs might be about, that is specific enough to where the reader can kind of predict what your body paragraphs will say. And so what I mean by this is that a lot of students fall into the trap of just saying, the connection between imperialism and religion was political and economic. That's kind of meaningless, right? That doesn't really tell us anything. It's like saying a civilization has culture. Everyone has culture, right? You can look at anything through politics or economics. So we want something a little bit more specific, like what about politics is the connection, right? What about economics? So get like one level down of more specificity before you move on. Now, with that being said, don't get too specific. You should not be talking about a document in your intro paragraph. You should not be bringing in outside evidence. You shouldn't be bringing in really any of your specific evidence. All this is like a preview of here's my main argument, and then wait, I'm going to prove it to you in the body paragraphs. Okay, let's look at two examples really quickly. So here's a US history example. This is actually from the DBQ last year. So the DBQ last year asked, evaluate the relative importance of different causes for the expanding role of the United States in the world in the period from 1865 to 1910. So a few things that I would notice if I was reading this prompt is what I'm looking at is causes specifically. I'm not talking about the impact of the US expanding role, whatever. I'm also thinking about the US's expanding role in the world, right? And so what they're asking me to do is, okay, there are multiple causes for why the US expanded its role in the world. They want you to evaluate their relative importance. Basically, the argument you're going to be making is this cause was more important than this cause, or these two causes were equally important, but this was the most important. That's essentially what they're asking you to do. Okay, let me hide myself for a second so that we can see my thesis statement. So a potential thesis would be, the civilizing mission and the desire to join the ranks of the major world powers both motivated the US to expand its role in the world from 1865 to 1910. However, the most significant motivation was economic expansion. So I just want you to notice a few things. First of all, this is what I mean when I say use keywords. So these things both motivated the US to expand its role in the world during this time period. Do you have to include all of these words? No, but if you do, it's a really good clue to the reader that you know what you're talking about, right? This is what I mean when you're the thesis statement is your first impression. It's the first time that the reader is really reading what you're writing. And so you want it to be as clear as possible. You want to give them confidence going into your essay that oh, I think this is going to be good, right? Then notice that this is where I'm doing the evaluating the relative importance. Here I'm saying both. So I'm basically saying these two causes that I first talk about are both of equal importance. However, the most significant was this, right? So another way to think about this is that I would then have 3 body paragraphs in theory. If I was a teacher and I read that thesis statement, I would expect to then see 3 body paragraphs. The first would talk about the civilizing mission and any documents, any evidence from documents that relates to that. The second would talk about us wanting to be seen as one of the top tier world powers. And then the last one would be about the economy. It's really best to format your essay in the same order your thesis statement is, because again, the more clear you can make it, the easier it is for the grader to see what you're doing and to give you points for what you're doing. And this year, since for the most part, we're going to be typing the essay, this is even easier to do, because let's say you go through and you actually decide you want to talk about the economy first. Cool. Just move this sentence to the beginning. It's a little bit nitpicky, but I just will say, as someone who has graded hundreds of DBQs in one sitting, it's much appreciated when you have really clear organization. And that also means start a new paragraph, indent, just for the sanity of the grader. They will do their best to try to find your argument and figure out what the heck you're saying. But if you can make it easier for them, that just gives them a little bit more brain space to notice all the other cool stuff you're doing in your essay. Okay, let's look at one more example. So this is a world history example from the 2018 DBQ. Evaluate the extent to which railroads affected the process of empire building in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918. So in AP World, we'd really need to be careful when they say things like in Afro-Eurasia, right? There's a geography element that is, I think, especially important in world history, because what this means is you are not talking about the Americas. Now, you could bring in the Americas maybe as context, but all of your evidence has to be from within whatever geographic region they give you, just like it needs to be from within whatever time period they're giving you, right? So if you do a whole thing about the United States building the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, cool, that might give you some context points, but that actually doesn't count for this argument because they've limited your geographic scope to just Afro-Eurasia. Okay, so what are the keywords for this prompt? It's railroads, and it's railroads' impact on empire building, right? And so keep in mind also causation. What they're asking is, how did railroads lead to or help or hinder empire building? What they're not asking is, how did empire building lead to railroads? Although, if you add that in at the end, hey, that could be some complexity. But the main bulk of your argument should be focusing on railroads and how railroads led to the increase of empires, the decrease of empires, whatever. All right, let's look at my thesis statement that I wrote. So railroads played a crucial role. Cool, I've already answered the question, basically, because they're asking me to evaluate the extent to which. That means on a spectrum, am I way over here at 100%? Am I way over here at no, not at all? Or am I somewhere in the middle? What I'm saying is I'm way over here at 100%, right? I'm saying they played a critical, crucial role in empire building. I've answered it, but notice if I just said railroads played a crucial role in empire building, period, you haven't fully explained that yet, right? The reader would be saying, how? What did they do? So I have to add in because they increased the physical connection between a state and its territories, while also providing an economic justification for the benefits of imperialism. Okay, now the reader would read that one sentence and say, okay, I have a good idea of what this person's going to argue in their now 2 body paragraphs. Another way to look at this, right? These would be my 2 body paragraphs. I would expect then that my first topic sentence of my next paragraph would say something like, railroads increase the physical connection between a state and its territories. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't make it too complicated. If you're really familiar and comfortable with what a topic sentence is, then you should just think of a thesis statement as your topic sentences all mashed together with and in the middle, right? That's all it really is. So then my next body paragraph would talk about how railroads provided economic justification for the benefits of imperialism. They made people think that imperialism is good because we're building railroads for them, whatever. Okay, let me pull my face back up. Not that y'all really care. So with that, the last question would be, how do you know when you have a quote unquote good thesis statement? The way that you know is if you can step back and think, if a random history teacher read just that thesis statement, then they would be able to write your essay for you in the way you wanted to write it. If your thesis statement does that, then it's good and you can move on. Meaning, if I'm walking down the street and I find a random piece of paper and I pick it up and all I read is railroads played a crucial role in empire building, yada, 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 I, being the nerd that I am, could go home and write the next 2 body paragraphs and they would look pretty similar to whatever you would write. Assuming we're all looking at the same 5 documents, right? That would be a little less weird. So if you can step back and think, could I give this to anyone kind of out of context? They would read this statement, they would look at the 5 documents and say, yeah, I pretty much know what they're going to say. Then you have your thesis statement and you can move on. And the good news about a good thesis statement is that then, like I said, you already have your topic sentences. You already have done a lot of the work of organizing your essay, which is something I'm going to talk about in the next video. So the next video is all about using the documents. How do we organize our documents? And then how do we use them to support the argument that we're making? In this case, how do we use them to support our thesis statement? Okay, thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure that you're following me on Instagram at Anti-Social Studies. Be looking out for the next episode on using the documents. And as always, please just let me know if you have any questions or there's any other videos I can make that will help you with your AP History exam. Bye.